Hey guys, and welcome back. My name is Miss Danielson, and today we're not doing a lesson on football. We're doing a lesson on factorizing by grouping. But with all those X's and O's in the playbook, you would think they had algebra in mind for this. Well, today we're going to be using football to explain how we factorize by grouping. In a football playbook, the X's actually stand for the defensive lineup, while the O's stand for the offensive lineup. Now, these are two separate teams, so obviously they come up with their plays on their own. But then they come back together, just like we do with regrouping, and they're ready to play. Now, hopefully, this won't be as dangerous as real football. You won't need a helmet, but you might want to put your thinking cap on. Let's get started. I hope you joined us for our previous 3 lessons on factorizing expressions. If not, you're jumping in right in the middle of the game. So you're going to want to have a look down in the description box below where I'll link those lessons for you. Go ahead, check those out, get a bit of practice, and come back when you're ready to play. Factors you should know about already. They're the values that perfectly divide a number, leaving no remainder. So whole number answers only. Factors come in pairs. For example, the factor pairs for 18 include 1 and 18, because if you divide 18 by 1, your answer is 18. And 2 and 9, 18 divided by 2 is 9. And 3 and 6. But also consider the negative factors. 18 divided by a negative 1 would give us negative 18. 18 divided by negative 2 would give us negative 9. And 18 divided by negative 3 would give us negative 6. I hope you're familiar with dividing positive and negative numbers. If you want to check out a lesson on that, I'll also link that down below for you. Factors may be numbers, as we've just shown, or variables like letters or symbols, or a combination of both. The factor pairs for 14a, for example, include a and 14. If I divided 14a by a, the a would cancel out and I'd be left with 14. I could also divide 14a by a number and variable term like 2a. The 14 divides by 2 to make 7, and the a divides by a, and it cancels out. So that leaves us with the factor pair 7. 14a similarly divides by 7a, and that leaves us with just 2. Or 14a divided by 14a, any value, number or variable divided by itself, gives an answer of just 1. And of course, we can consider our negative factors as well. You need to remember as well that all values, apart from 1, have at least 2 factors, being 1 and themselves. So if you're struggling to find a factor for some value, remember to think about those 2 possibilities. The term in front of a set of brackets, once we've factorized an expression, could be called the common factor of all terms inside the brackets. If you have not yet copied these notes down from our previous 3 lessons, you're going to want to copy those down before we go on to an example. Here's an example of an expression with a common factor. So we can find the highest common factor of all 3 terms as we've done before. First, consider all terms of the expression, and there are 3 terms there separated by plus signs. For each of those 3 terms, we'll look at the numbers, 28, 35, and 14. What's the highest common factor of 28, 35, and 14? We can all divide by 7. But don't just look at the numbers, also look at the letters. A squared, AB, AC. All 3 terms involve the letter A. So I could divide all 3 terms by 7A. The highest common factor would then be both a number and a letter term. So I'll put 7A in front of a set of brackets, and inside the brackets, I write the corresponding factor pair for each term. So 28a squared divided by 7a. Remember, we do number by number, 28 divided by 7, which is 4. And letter by letter, a squared divided by a will cancel one of those a's, leaving me with 4a inside the brackets. On to the next term. It's a positive term, and we're dividing it by positive 7a. So we're going to start by saying this is a positive term inside the brackets. 35 divided by 7 is positive 5, and AB divided by A will cancel out that A, so that'll be 5B. Don't forget the plus sign. It's positive 5B, so plus 5B. That way I can clearly see these are 2 separate terms. Next, 14AC divided by positive 7A, a positive term divided by a positive will give me a positive value inside the bracket. So plus 14 divided by 7 is 2, and the A will cancel out with the other A, leaving me with just the C. So that's 2C. Now check your factorized expression. See that it's got the same number of terms inside the brackets as the original expression had. Also check that if you expanded out this bracket, you would end up with the same expression as we began with, 7A times 4A, 7A times 5B, 7A times 2C, and make sure that the terms inside the bracket don't have any other common factors apart from 1. If there's still a common factor inside that bracket, we won't have factorized fully. Now, if you join us for the previous 3 lessons, this will be nothing new. This is just factorizing expressions where there is a common factor. But today we're going to look at expressions where there is not a common factor for all terms of the expression. And that's where we get into factorizing by grouping. Here's an example which we'll need to factorize by grouping. First, consider all terms of the expression and note that there is no number or variable that all 4 of these terms could be divided by. So this is where we're going to consider making 2 teams. They must be equal-sized teams to be fair. So as there are 4 terms in this expression, I'm going to make 2 teams of 2 terms each. I'm going to call the first 2 terms the red team and the second 2 terms the blue team. The reason I chose to put 2AC and 6AB on the same team is because I can see that they have common factors. Both of these terms could divide by 2A. And I saw that on the blue team, they also have a common factor. They could both divide by B. Now, don't worry about including the second term in with the blue team just because it has a B. We need to keep the sizes of the team equal. Otherwise, it would be unfair. But our next step is just that, to look at the common factors of the teams and factor separately. For the red team, my common factor being 2A, I'm going to call that guy my quarterback. And for the blue team, my common factor being positive B, and be very clear that I'm factoring out a positive number, so I'll put plus B in front of the second set of brackets. And these quarterbacks, along with the coach, are going to decide what the rest of the team is going to do. Now, since the 2A has been pulled out of the first term, we have to think, what is 2AC divided by 2A? Or, if you prefer to think of it this way, what do we need to multiply 2A by in order to get 2AC? And the answer is C. Then think of the second term of this red team, 6AB. If I divide that by 2A, I will have positive 3B. So there we have it. Our quarterback from the red team has organized their team and they've decided on what play they're going to run. On the blue team, our quarterback, our positive B, has been factored out of the team. So the third term here, BC, if I divide it by B, we'll be left with C inside the bracket. For our last term, if we divide that by B, we'll be left with 3B inside the bracket. Both the red team and the blue team seem to be ready to play now. Notice something really important. Inside the red bracket, we've got the same expression as inside the blue bracket. And that was not an accident. That should always be the case. If these 2 teams are ready to play, they must agree on the rules, and they have. So now we're ready to regroup so that we can play. The way that we regroup is to try and decide what bracket multiplied by what other bracket would give the same original expression. It should be pretty clear that one of the 2 brackets should be C plus 3B, as we know that we need to do 2A times C plus 3B, and we also need to do B times C plus 3B. So the other bracket is going to include the quarterbacks from both of my teams, so that's 2A plus B. There's my regrouped factorized expression. Our next step is just to mentally check that we've done that correctly. And by mentally checking it, you'll understand why we regrouped in this way. We would mentally check that by saying 2a times c is 2ac. That's the same thing as me doing 2a times c up above. Then I do 2a times 3b, which would be 6ab. That's the same as me doing 2a times 3b up above. Then I go on to the blue team. The quarterback of the blue team is going to also multiply through by the c. b times c gives me bc, and that's the same thing as I would do if I was multiplying the expression up above. And then I do b times 3b, which gives me 3b squared. Exactly the same step as I would have done if I left my expression as it was up above. But now that I've regrouped this nicely, it's set out in a nice, tidy, bracketed way. Our two teams are ready to butt helmets. And there you have it, factorizing by grouping, football style. Now, you can choose your teams slightly differently. I just chose to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. And that seemed to work because the first two terms definitely had a common factor and the last two terms had a common factor. But you could have grouped this in a different way. Let's try option 2. You might have grouped the first term with the third term, seeing that they both have C as a common factor, and the second term with the fourth term because they both have B as a common factor. And that would be totally fine. We've got a different red team and a different blue team now. We'll have different quarterbacks, but when we form our plays and regroup, we should end up with the same factorized expression. If you don't believe me, let's try it and see. So for our red team, we are going to factor out the C. For the blue team, we are going to factor out 3b. Don't forget, it's positive 3b. We need that plus sign there. Now, what's going to go inside the red team's bracket? 2ac divided by c would leave us with 2a. And bc divided by c would leave us with positive b. So 2a plus b. Let's see what the blue team's game plan is. If I factor out the 3b, 6ab divided by 3b would be 6 divided by 3 is 2. The b will cancel, but I'll still have the a, so that's 2a. And then 3b squared divided by 3b. 3 divided by 3, that'll be 1. B squared divided by b, that would just be b. So plus 1b, or simply plus b. 2a plus b. Both teams have formed their game plan. Their game plans are a match. We've agreed this is how we're going to play the game. Let's get together and do it. So setting up our brackets, we definitely know that one of our brackets is going to be 2a plus b, and the other bracket will just be where the two quarterbacks get together. So c plus 3b is our first bracket, and 2a plus b is our second bracket. Notice that although we made different teams, we end up with the same factorized expression. It's just written the other way around. 2a plus b, 2a plus b. C plus 3b, c plus 3b. Exactly the same, so you could expand that out to double check. C times 2a would be 2ac, c times b would be bc, 3b times 2a would be 6ab, and 3b times b would be 3b squared. What about if we grouped it like this? Now, you can choose your teams, but you must choose them wisely. If you chose a red team to be 4ac and 3b squared, what's the common factor? 1. And for the other team, 6ab and bc, well, you could have a common factor of b. Let's try factoring out 1 from the red team. Anything divided by 1 stays the same. So inside that bracket, I'll have 2ac plus 3b squared. And factoring out b from the blue team, I'll be left with 6a and c, 6a plus c. Now my brackets do not match, so I can't regroup. It's not possible to regroup. If your brackets don't match, you've done something wrong. So you're going to need to go back to the original expression and maybe choose your teams a little bit more wisely, or maybe you've made some kind of a mistake while you were factorizing. Let's do a couple more examples. One of the biggest mistakes you can make when factorizing by grouping is mistaking the plus or minus signs. So notice these three examples here do have some minus signs in them, so be very careful when you think about what the factor is, and very careful when you think about what signs you need to put either in front of each term or inside the brackets. So looking at this first example here, thinking about how we could group these terms in such a way that they would have common factors on both teams. I'm going to say again that the first two terms are the red team and the second two terms are the blue team. The red team have A as a common factor, while the blue team have B or negative B as a common factor. I'm going to go ahead and set that up with the quarterback in front of the red team and the quarterback in front of the blue team. I've chosen negative B as my common factor, and you'll see in a minute why I've done that. Inside the red brackets, A squared divided by A would just be A, and AC divided by A would just be positive C. Inside the blue brackets, negative AB divided by negative B, negative divided by a negative will be positive, so that will be positive A. And negative BC divided by negative B, again will give me positive C inside the brackets. So inside the blue brackets, I also have the expression A plus C. If I had put positive B as my quarterback outside that bracket, I'd have a different expression inside the bracket. The signs are so important. Now that my brackets match, my game plan matches for both teams, let's regroup. One of my brackets is definitely going to be A plus C. My other bracket is going to contain the two quarterbacks from the two teams, that is A minus B. You can double check that by multiplying that through, but you'll see that A times A is A squared, A times C is AC, negative B times A is negative AB, and negative B times C is negative BC. Let's try example B. If you think you've got it, maybe you want to hit pause and try it for yourself now. If not, just copy it down and keep going with me. This time, which team should we make? I'm going to stick with putting the first two terms on the red team and the last two terms on the blue team. But for a reason, I can see the first two terms definitely have a common factor, and the last two terms also definitely have a common factor. What's our highest common factor of the first two terms? Not just 3, but 3A. And of the last two terms, should we put the common factor as positive C or negative C? I'm going to go with negative C. Let's see how that works out. If it's wrong, we'll just go back and try it with a positive. First, let's factorize the red team. So 3AC divided by 3A will leave me with positive C inside the bracket, and negative 3AB divided by positive 3A will give us a negative term inside the bracket. That would be negative B. So C minus B in the red bracket. In the blue bracket, if I divide negative C squared by negative C, a negative divided by a negative will give us positive, it'll be positive C. And positive BC divided by negative C, a positive divided by a negative, will give us negative B inside the brackets. We've got the brackets that match. So our two quarterbacks have sorted out their team, they got their game plans match, let's regroup and play. One of our brackets will definitely be C minus B. The other bracket will be the quarterbacks of both teams, 3A minus C. Our last example. Again, let's form our teams. You could form them any way you like. If you want to hit pause and try it for yourself, by all means do that. Otherwise, just copy it down and work along with me. I'm going to make my two teams again, the red team for the first two terms and the blue team for the last two terms, because I noticed that the first two terms have got a common factor of not just A, but 2A. And the last two terms have got a common factor of not just 2, but 2b. But should I make it positive 2b or negative 2b? I'm going to try positive 2b this time. Let's give it a go. If it's wrong, we can fix it. So, factorizing the red team, 6ab divided by 2a, 6 divided by 2 is 3, the a will cancel, and we're left with 3b. And negative 2ac divided by positive 2a will leave me with negative 2 divided by 2, that's 1. A divided by a, that cancels, so that's just negative c. So 3b minus c. In the second set of brackets, if I divide the first term by 2b, negative 6 divided by positive 2 will give me negative 3. And b squared divided by b will give me b, so negative 3b. And the second term, 2bc divided by 2b, will give me positive c. The brackets don't match. But I think it should be pretty clear where my mistake was. The brackets almost match. I've got the 3b and I've got the c, but I've got a plus sign instead of a minus sign. And even though I did the division correctly in my head, I wrote it down wrong. Did you notice that? It should have been negative 3b plus c. Both of these terms have the wrong sign, and that's because I've put a plus out here. Let's try that again, but let's vector out negative 2b instead for the blue team. So factoring out negative 2b, negative 6b squared divided by negative 2b will give me positive 3b. And positive 2bc divided by negative 2b, a positive divided by negative, will give us negative c. Now my brackets match. I'm feeling a bit more sure about this. Let's go teams, let's play. One of the brackets will be 3b minus c, the other bracket will be the two quarterbacks brought together. You can try expanding that out and you'll see that you got the same original 4-term expression from the beginning. Now that's enough practice, it's game time. Wait, no, it's practice time. Ready to practice? Okay, go ahead and copy these questions down. Be very careful to make sure you copy the correct plus or minus signs, and pay attention to these powers here. So when you're finding a common factor, make sure you find the highest common factor, and that includes the powers of the variables. Go ahead and hit pause now, give it a go, and hit play when you're ready to take it up. I hope you had a chance to hit pause. Let's take up the answers. For question 1, you might have written your brackets in the opposite order. So one bracket with n plus 5 and the other bracket with 5m plus 3n squared, that would be fine. Question 2, question 3, question 4, question 5, question 6, question 7, question 8, question 9, and question 10. Now, how did you do? Hopefully you did okay. If not, please let me know. Leave a comment down in the comment section down below so I can help to explain any doubts that you might be having. If you enjoyed this lesson and are interested in seeing how this is used in the future, this is a really helpful skill for when you get to higher GCSE and you start factorizing quadratics by splitting the middle term. So if you're interested in that, I'll link it down in the description box for you below. Otherwise, keep practicing and I'll see you soon.